late comer to the EJ space. I'm an attorney by trade. I was appointed to the Florida Public Service Commission, and I got into environmental issues because when utilities do power plants, there's a very active discussion about environmental issues. But I learned that the issues are much deeper than that. That's kind of what I want to focus on today. I am chairman of the board of an organization called Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. We operate throughout a number of southern states. Our main focus has been on high-level energy regulation and legislative focus. But many of our members have got involved in some very important local activism efforts. We got involved in Florida, particularly energy efficiency, which is a significant factor in dealing with energy burdens and low moderate income, but is again resisted by many powers that be in the energy sector. We got involved in Memphis with a particular program there to support renewable energy. One of our members is very close along the coastal areas to raise awareness and resistance to offshore oil shale. And then we've been heavy active with Duke and Southern Company and Florida Power and Light in their rate case proceedings to put force downward pressure on rates, which is a major factor. But as it relates to this idea that we're talking about today, that's not been the main highway. But I kind of, actually my personal law practice, have gotten more into the whole idea of environmental justice. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. You guys probably all know this much better than I because I'm into the field, but I kind of wanted to educate myself to understand how we got here. It's because, this didn't just start happening. The idea that there have been polluters, those polluters have been doing major damage, that's been around for a long time. But what happened was the sensitivity of that was mostly addressed in middle income and more affluent communities. And the NIMBY effect came in. So what you saw were policies, particularly in the 90s and 80s and 90s, that were designed to protect those kinds of communities. And very clearly, and some would argue purposely, marginalized many other communities. So what we saw was, some would argue, purposeful an undue risk allocation where you put heavily risky, polluting sources into marginalized communities. I could go around this room and tell you and find some incredible stories. I had no idea about this until one day, but it started creeping home to me. The project that really what came home to me was a case I'm involved in Jacksonville. A very, very densely populated African American neighborhood right behind Edward Waters College, if you knew who that is. They did a zoning change and put in place a wood treatment plant next door to an elementary school. If any of you know how that process works, they pressure treat wood with a form of arsenic. This company was known far and wide to be horribly managing this chemical on that operation. And it was known that this chemical was leaking out of that site into a storage pond that separated the site and the school. It's now a Superfund site. And the remediation of that site, they removed over 60 tons of soil. And there's a real strong argument they only got a fourth of what they should have got out. They remediated over 50 residential properties in addition to the school next door. The Florida Department of Health came in and said that there was no medical impact from that. There's never been a true medical assessment in this community. I represented most of the employees in the community. At that time, there were only about 4 or 5 of them. Now, many more. I'm getting calls every month now who contracted cancer and passed away. There's this chemical called skin condition, respiratory conditions. I went to meetings, people walked in, carrying the oxygen, the whole 9 yards. But yet still, nobody's come over there and attached their medical conditions to that exposure. The department guesstimated what the exposure should have been and said based on their guesstimates, there should not have been any medical impact. Dr. Greg and family, you did some important work over there. So, what's the deal here? This is our legacy of civil rights advocacy is directly a factor in environmental justice. This is racial discrimination. That kind of stuff is racial discrimination. Clarence and I were talking about a situation he had with what's it called, the landfill. So somebody heard about the work I was doing in Jacksonville. I get a call from this community down in Tampa. They're building like anthills in that central area down there, North Hillsborough County. Incredible building going on. These people started buying into a community where at the time they started being, there was a landfill there. They were told the landfill would get decommissioned. And so when they got there, it was probably 150 houses. There are now over 1,000 houses that have been built in the last 4 to 5 years. That landfill is 3 times the size it was. The guy who called me lives directly behind it. He says in the summer, when it's hot, nobody in that neighborhood can go outside at night. His daughter has asthma. He's sick. His mother is sick. But yet, they can't get anyone to come down and do an investigation. We kind of at a perverse laugh, because when I went down there to have a meeting, this guy comes in and said, "No, we got to sell these houses. Don't tell anybody that this is going on, so we can get out of here." And so he did not want to investigate and do any kind of investigation about trying to figure out what the true rumors could be. This is the premium call. This is a call to action. What I'm hearing here, what I'm excited to hear today is that there's awareness. There's now we gotta take up arms. We gotta get involved. There's this historical, and now one of the main reasons why it's becoming more important because we're going to have cumulative impacts. I'll talk more about that later. But the growing harm that's being experienced both from these sources and now from cumulative impact of climate change is making this at a crisis level. I want to move on quickly because I don't have much time. So climate change is not being, you see all the after effects, but it's known that climate change is at a crisis level and it will get worse. It directly is causing extreme weather conditions, heat, flooding, hurricanes, but the indirect effects are really what's becoming so significant. We're seeing trauma at an untold level, and that trauma is being experienced, guess what? Disproportionately in underserved communities. The CDC is now tracking this effect. This is a chart that comes from them. They're now understanding that we're seeing immediate health and safety risks because of the growing impacts of climate change. So, what you've done, your experience, your background in advocating and acting, becoming active regarding traditional polluting sources, I argue and suggest to you, now must be transferred, not transferred, but added to these communities now being disproportionately impacted by climate change. Right now, in Dade County, the Haitian community and the African American community is being moved out of North Broward County on something called climate change gentrification. They are escalating the rent so they can't afford it anymore. And the reason they're doing it is because all the people on South Beach are getting flooded out. The real estate investors are coming in, claiming that land. As soon as they get them out of there, you're going to see some of the fanciest condos you ever seen in your life in Liberty City. Anybody know about Liberty City? That's the real hood. Oh, it is. That's happening right now. Where have you heard that spoken about? I was doing somebody asked me to come in and give a briefing to the black legislators in Florida. And I came in and they were looking at the watch, they couldn't wait till I could get gone. And then I happened to speak, say, climate change gentrification. The reference from Dade County jumped all over me. Why aren't you doing something about it? I thought you were in the legislature. That's a story for another night. So, it's becoming, now what change and energy burden. And they're having cumulative effects. Specifically, they're estimating that people are, well, they're estimating people aren't dying from extreme heat. They're estimating that issue is going to become, the city of Miami has hired a heat officer because, not because they, well, I guess there may be somebody who's really concerned about this poor household. The real deal is they're concerned about the liability issue. The insurance industry is now a task force about climate change and extreme heat because they don't want to have the risk of paying claims. There are communities that are, Miami and others, who are, they're doing something about climate, or at least they're hiring somebody. But they're not talking about energy justice. They're not talking about environmental justice. They only want to do something about extreme heat. Your task is to figure out how to meld those two together, all three of those together, and come at them with a comprehensive policy approach and a comprehensive solution approach. This last point killed me. I didn't know this. But I saw it in Hurricane Michael in Panama City. When Hurricane Michael came to Panama City, it wiped out. I went over there on the beach side. They had trucks, lines everywhere. 2 blocks away was a black neighborhood. This lady couldn't get somebody to come and fix it. She had a big glass window. Somebody came and stuck a piece of wood in her living room, didn't tack it down, and left. That black community, there are trees everywhere. This was 3 weeks after Hurricane Michael hit. What they're seeing now is the more we see these hurricanes, as destructive as they are, I think you'll find in Port Charlotte and other places, the investment comes back to affluent communities, doesn't come back to underserved communities. You got to talk about that. Nobody else will. Okay, I'll move on as quickly as I can. So I want to quickly go through a case study. So we get these things, you got to put them in a logical context so the policymakers understand. I worked at the Florida legislature for 8 years before I served on the commission. Money drives the process. It has ruined the process. So you got to figure out how to put data and case studies on the table to make your case. Here's one. In Florida, they want to deal with the management of low-income household energy burdens. So they did this purpose. They got the Department of Energy and some other folks that did the solar weatherization project. They went and put solar hot water heaters into low-income housing. 800 some odd systems. This is the kind of impact they had. Look at the reduction in water consumption. Who's telling EPA that they can have this kind of impact by doing solar hot water heaters? Somebody in this room needs to go make that case to them. Because they need to put money on the line to go to these low houses. Now, when they do that, guess what they're going to do? Look at the third line. Average system savings. Now, there are households that saw way more savings than this. But then these households are going to see 20 to 25% drop in their monthly energy bill at a time when energy burdens are killing households. So that's pretty much my story. I want to move on because I want to be some respect for other people.